We are now on 7.4, the Good Neighbor Bylaw. And Graham is introducing this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and then I will quickly pass it off to Dan. So under the good governance heading of Council's priorities is the updating, creation, development, and evaluation of district bylaws. This builds a governing framework that promotes openness, accountability, and responsible leadership for the community as a whole. One of the bylaw priorities is the Good Neighbor Bylaw. Numerous municipalities across Canada and within the province of BC have enacted Good Neighbor Bylaws. Reviewing the district of Summerland bylaws, staff determined that 4 bylaws could be replaced with a new bylaw allowing one single bylaw to address community nuisances. This will make it easier for staff and citizens to see what regulations are in place for property maintenance. Those will be described further in a moment. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan to walk us through his presentation.
Thank you, Graham. Your Worship, Councillors, quite happy to bring this forward. I guess this is my first bylaw outright. I know it's been asked for not only by yourselves, but of the community. We had reached out to a working group called Summerland Shines. They shared their results with us and what their proposal was. It's been included, bits and pieces of it are in here, as well as the other communities that we researched to come up with our final draft. Good Neighbor Bylaw, what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage good relationships between neighbors. Bylaw enforcement is a lot of mediation work. For whatever reason, 2 neighbors they have an issue they're trying to resolve. They phone us. We're hoping that the adoption of a Good Neighbor Bylaw will help get us to that stage a little bit sooner. It updates and replaces 4 bylaws. It also introduces nuisance abatement fees, which are relatively recent thing in BC. The province has given us some ability to try and recover some of the costs of our fire, RCMP, and bylaw staff time. The relationships, we want to reinforce those community standards. That's what bylaws are. This is the community standards. These are the bylaws of the District of Summerland. This is how we expect our citizens to live, and they're unique to us, which is really great. Property owners are held accountable along with the tenants. So not only do we talk to the tenants, but we get the property owners involved when needed to help achieve compliance with harder issues. We're also trying to address nuisance properties. So nuisance properties are those where, for whatever reason, fire, bylaw, or RCMP are attending quite often or more often than normal. And we want to identify those properties. We also want to try and make those property owners accountable by actually giving them a bill for our time and our services. So the bylaws we're updating with this Good Neighbor Bylaw. We're updating in the Boulevard Maintenance Bylaw. We're updating property maintenance, unsightly premises, and weed control bylaw. Removal of snow, ice, and rubbish from municipal sidewalks and footpaths bylaw, and the noise regulation bylaw. They were all adopted early to mid-90s, and only one saw an amendment, which was in 1997. So they are overdue. The ombudsman's report for best practices say bylaws should be reviewed every 5 years. Obviously, with small communities and the workload, it gets hard to go back to some of those bylaws. So we're doing that today. Along with amending those bylaws, we're adding some new offenses. And we're doing that to anticipate what may come in the future. These aren't necessarily problems that Summerland sees today, but they are problems that Penticton's seeing, West Kelowna's seeing, Kelowna's seeing, Peachland's seeing. So rather than wait for those concerns to start happening here, we felt, as there in most other Good Neighbor bylaws, we would encourage, or we'd add them into ours. As far as nuisance abatement fees go, this allows for direct billing. Well, I guess I shouldn't stand too far back. This is pretty common, and when you have a property, and we have a few properties here, we keep having to go back. We go back, we talk to the owners. You really need to fix this. You really need to fix this. I'm going to have to give you a ticket. Here's your ticket. Still need to fix this. That all takes time. That takes time, manpower. It's not always myself going. It's the RCMP. Sometimes it's the fire department. We want to make sure that as a part of even the fines, we start tracking that and then possibly billing property owners. So what we're proposing is if we have to attend a property 3 times in a year for the same issue, then that's when they would kick in. So it's not something that we're going to do all the time. You don't actually issue too many of these, but when you all of a sudden have a problem property where they're having a poker game every Saturday night, and the RCMP are called at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then they're talking to me Monday morning saying, Dan, what can we do? What can we do? This is one of those things that, you know what, if it happens 4 weeks in a row, well, that 4th week, we can now start billing the property owner $250 each time the RCMP attend. That's over and above anything that we may do enforcement action-wise. So we may issue a ticket for the noise. We may ask the province to attend currently for COVID restriction violations, but it's over and above. And it brings the property owners into the conversation about what's going on in their property and why we need their help to achieve compliance. So compliance orders is another part. While there are nuisance orders that we would come to council for problem properties, hazardous properties, compliance orders is for that weed property. So the guy's got tall weeds or grasses, dealing with one right now. The weeds on it, they are on the noxious weed list from the province. They are hazardous to livestock, so horses in particular, makes horses sick. This is just one of those updates to our property maintenance bylaw to make sure that we're current and that we're still addressing the weeds that we need to address. And the compliance order does that. If they don't trim them right away, we can hire a crew and go after them that way. And then they get billed again. It's again a direct billing system. So we feel that the benefits of this process, it will actually help us achieve more compliance without laying fines, without having to go to court, which is always the goal. And, oh, I've already skipped past that. No, I haven't. So that's why we're proposing this bylaw. It just gives us more opportunities to achieve compliance before having to do any kind of court action. Court action is time consuming for both us and the property owner. So this hopefully will help us avoid some of that in the future. With that, we will have to amend our bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw as well, to adopt a new fee or a new fine schedule. While we have that bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw open, there were a couple of changes to a couple other schedules or other parts of the schedule that we're introducing. Rewording one charge in the traffic bylaw. Currently, the description is to obstruct municipal sign, where the charge is actually to be parked on a bike path or sidewalk. So we want to change that to park contrary to traffic control device. The sign is don't park here. If you park in the bike lane, you get a ticket for park contrary to traffic control sign. The other one, we're introducing a new zoning bylaw charge, which is already in the zoning bylaw. It's not an amendment to the bylaw. It's just an addition to the fine schedule. And that's for use contrary to zoning. So instead of having to fine on each specific section of the zoning bylaw, this is an all-encompassing charge. And it allows me to remember one charge when I'm writing a ticket with a gentleman upset with me on his property, as opposed to having to remember, I want to say 20 or 30. So those are the questions, or those are my submissions. Hopefully you had a chance to read it. And I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Dan. One question, when you were talking about being held accountable with the owners and the tenants in regards to fines. So if it was on the third offense and they went back, is that fine would, if it was a tenant, be levied against the tenant, or would that fine be levied against the property owner?
So the ticket could be issued to the occupant or owner, or both. The abatement fee itself goes to the property owner, and it goes to the property owner because at the end of the year, if those fees aren't paid, they can be put on property taxes under the community charter.
Excellent, thank you. One more question, if I may. You were also talking in regards to noxious weeds where we could go in and we could remove or remediate the site.
Yeah.
Through this bylaw, would that eliminate having to do a section 72 where you'd have to come to council to get approval to go forward to enter somebody's property and then get council approval to charge that property based on the Local Government Act?
Correct. Yeah, there's very limited abilities in the community charter to go to not have to include council in some of those nuisance properties. Weeds being one because it is a provincial act on its own. And it's been, people have been doing that for years, but unsightly properties. So if it's just unsightly and we're just tidying up the yard, we already have the ability to do direct enforcement and clean up the property and bill the property owner that. As soon as we get into hazardous conditions, dams, water, dikes, or I mean, it's still called a nuisance property, but it's when the building is dilapidated and unsafe. That's when we would come to council for a nuisance designation to deal with the building itself. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So then this is a, do you see this as a tool? You know, we've had complaints in the past on certain Airbnbs that rowdy, noisy neighbors are complaining. Is this a tool that if there's noise infractions and the RCMP show up there X amount of times, then you have the ability to go find that homeowner and or absentee homeowner?
Yeah, it could definitely be used for that purpose until we actually get a short-term regulation bylaw in place. But even with an STR regulation in place, the noise bylaw would still be enforceable. And yeah, that's exactly it. So instead of just maybe a fine, if all of a sudden we send them a bill for 4 attendances by the RCMP because their tenants have been absolutely crazy this weekend, that's just another way to get their attention.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So when I was going through the bylaw, I was thinking of there's a few kind of real life scenarios, if you will, that I was just wondering if they applied or how they might apply. So if I could just kind of give them to you and you could comment if that's okay. So say it's a construction site in a residential area or re-roofing and they're playing the radio really loud. Roofers seem to like to do that. So I've been told in the past that that's because it's a construction site, those sort of things are overlooked with the, you know, they don't really apply in the same way or not, which I thought was kind of peculiar because a blaring radio is a blaring radio. So, so I'm just wondering if that, in the noise regulations 8.2 that governs that sort of thing, whether that applies if it's a construction site or not. So that's one. A couple others too, if that's okay.
Would you like to answer that one first, and then we'll get on to the other questions?
Sure. Yeah. Dealt with the noisy stereo at construction site a number of times. A lot of times it isn't the necessarily the volume of the stereo, it's the message coming out of the stereo. So it is an amplified music. doesn't while the construction workers appreciate having it, it isn't an actual need to construct a building. So I would be getting them to turn it down to an acceptable level.
And then that would, just to follow up, that would follow, then that's not the problem with the property though, that's the problem with the contractor or the roofer or whatever. So this doesn't necessarily fall on the property owner.
Yeah, and unfortunately with some construction companies, they're in and out of town all the time, hard to track. If I've had to go back to the property a number of times, that's when I would want to get the property owner involved to say, hey, because if he tells his construction crew, well, you're off the job if you don't correct this, sometimes that has a pretty good impact on the behavior. Might not right now with the building boom, everybody's looking for contractors as opposed to not. So, but yeah, homeowners really need to be aware of what's happening on their property and that they're accountable. We all have to be good citizens. And part of that is making sure your crews aren't, for whatever reason you've hired them, that they're not bothering your neighbor, or at least minimizing it. Construction is a tough one, but they have pretty broad, I mean, to be allowed to make noise from 7 to 9 every day, that's a pretty generous timeline. And to expect them to be done by 9 and not work Sundays is pretty reasonable, I think. So.
Yeah, I just think, construction noise, people are generally okay with, the sounds of people being productive and building and hammering and sawing, whatever, that's fine. But it's just the constant of a radio blasting from a rooftop that's, could I ask another?
Sure, and then we'll go on to Councillor Van Elfen.
And the other scenario would be like vehicles, trailers, boats and whatever parked all over a piece of property, the lawns or whatever, if they don't have enough driveway to accommodate all their vehicles. Is there, I couldn't see anything in there about, do you have to have a driveway to park your vehicles, or can you just park them anywhere on your own property?
So a lot of the parking is in the zoning bylaw. Currently, you can only have 2 uninsured on your property. I'm hoping to address what I'm noticing is a fair size accumulation on some agricultural properties, but that's for another bylaw. And then of course, parking on the road with trailers and all that, we're going to address a bit more in the traffic bylaw when we bring that forward for amendments. So a lot of that traffic stuff hasn't been included in this bylaw right now.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The property maintenance on sightly premises weed control bylaw, is that also ALR land?
I believe so, because the Weed Act is all property.
Okay.
And it definitely is in this bylaw.
Because you got a lot, even ALR lands that are being neglected.
Yep.
So, and then it affects the neighbors. Thank you.
Council, other questions? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. You made mention of accumulation of vehicles on properties and said a lot of that is on some agricultural properties, and that's for another bylaw. Why wouldn't this bylaw apply for, if there's 6 derelict vehicles on a piece as land within the ALR?
Derelict for sure. Derelict for sure is in this bylaw.
Okay.
Because that was always part of the unsightly properties bylaw.
Okay.
But just, I mean, there's a lot of collectors in Summerland. So they may have 12 cars. Sometimes those 12 cars aren't derelict. So, however, we want to save our agricultural lands and not necessarily use them as car lots. So that's why it's better in the zoning bylaw as far as parking and loading.
So that's what you were referring to, not necessarily derelict cars, but
Correct. Yeah, no, derelict cars are definitely covered by this bylaw.
yeah.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'll ask someone to bring forward the motion, please. 2 of them there. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That council give first, second, and third readings to the Good Neighbor Bylaw number 2021-023. And two, that council give first, second, and third readings to Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw Amendment Good Neighbor Bylaw Offenses Bylaw number 2021-024.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Trainer, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 7.6, fees and charges bylaw update. And Graham, you're introducing this one.
Thank you, Your Worship. So reviewing the fees and charges bylaw is a council priority, and staff have been reviewing the document over the past few months. The first section that was reviewed and actually will be presented for adoption later today was the recreation fees and charges piece, and that these development charges are next in line. This ties to good governance of council's priorities because the regular review and update of the district fees and charges ensures that users pay their fair share of municipal services rather than relying on the taxable base to fund these. The last time the development service fees and charges were reviewed was in November 2018. Since that time, district has identified a number of work processes that are currently omitted from the fees and charges bylaw rather, and therefore being completed at no charge or at a charge being applied without being in the bylaw. In addition, new process has been established for mobile beach vending permit applications. As a result, staff have prepared fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2021-025. With that, I'll turn over to Brad to walk us through this item, who is our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Graham. So just to walk through the proposed changes with bylaw number 2021-025, the proposed draft amendment bylaw proposed changes to the following schedules: Schedule D, development services charges; Schedule E, our building permit fees; Schedule H, our blasting permit fee, and also the introduction of a new schedule titled Schedule U for a mobile beach vending permit fee. I do want to point out that Schedule F, the business license classification and fees, was not proposed to be amended at this time, as staff is planning to review our business license fees in the fall of this year to coincide with the 2022 budget review process. So just in detail, with regards to the changes being made, Schedule D, development services charges to start. Currently, the district requires for all building permit as well as development applications that they provide a land title upon submission of an application to confirm their ownership of the property. If someone does not have a land title in their possession when they try to apply, we normally, right now, what's currently happening, we're directing them to a notary to provide a land title and pull that from the land titles office and then come back to our office with that land title before we accept that application. And from my perspective, and actually going through that process myself when applying for a building permit, I find it very poor customer service. I think this is a service we can easily provide at our front counter. The district does have a log-on to pull title ourselves, and it costs roughly $13 to pull title. Plus, as well, there could be additional charges to that $13 amount for encumbrances found on title, such as restrictive covenants that we were also pulling at the same time. So to cover these costs, on average, we recommend a $20 fee to pull title ourselves on behalf of customers. And we could do so if customers want us to do so on their behalf. Property information requests. As council is aware, with the amount of real estate activity we're having right now, we are also experiencing growth in the number of property information requests that are coming from the realtor industry to our office to gain knowledge of a property prior to listing it. Typically, the number of information requests that we've been processing is around 30 to 50 information requests per month. For each request, total administrative staff time is around 20 minutes to 1.5 hours to access requested information and scan copies and then send it to the requester. We currently do not charge for this service, but we are recommending now that we do start to charge for this service with a $50 fee, and this is similar to other South Okanagan communities, which I provided in my report with Table 1. For rezoning and OCP amendment applications, currently our rezoning application fee is $500. Our joint OCP and rezoning amendment application fee is $1,000. Rezoning processes, as council's aware, often take a significant amount of staff time to process, and there is a substantial amount of public engagement associated with each application. We feel right now we're currently out of line with other South Okanagan comparables with this fee, so we are recommending that this be bumped up to $1,000 for rezoning and then also $1,500 for joint applications with OCP and rezoning. For temporary use permit renewals, currently we have a fee set for temporary use permits. It's $1,000. But staff recognize that if we are processing a renewal application for a temporary use permit and the community is already aware of this existing temporary use permit operation, let's say if it's a home-based business as an example that's being operated, there's definitely an easier process to get that renewal versus a new application being brought forward. For that reason, we're also proposing the introduction of a new reduced fee for a renewal of a temporary use permit to $500, which would be cheaper than our normal application fee for a temporary use permit. For Agricultural Land Commission applications, in September of last year, the Agricultural Land Commission changed their process for taking application fees for ALC applications. Previously, ALC application fees were set by the ALC, and local governments were prescribed amount that they could intake, and that was $300 per application, and that was consistent for all application types to the ALC. And in terms of process, the local government was required to collect the entire fee that was due to the ALC upon submission of an application, and refund the ALC portion back to the applicant if council decide not to forward that application to the ALC. In September of this year, last year, sorry, they did change that process so that now applicants can only pay the local government portion upon application. And have again prescribed what that local government fee is to be. And they've set a consistent rate of it being 50% of the overall ALC application fee, which is provided in the table in my report. That's right from their ALC website. So we are recommending those amendments be added into our fees and charges bylaw, that we would only take 50% of the ALC fee upon application. And then the rest would be due if council did support the application moving forward to the ALC. We've also added a new bylaw enforcement section. This bylaw enforcement section actually coincides with the amendments being proposed with the new Good Neighbor bylaw, which council just received a presentation for. We've included the nuisance abatement fees to our schedule to be that $250 amount per occurrence for RCMP and bylaw services, as well as fire department calls. We would always provide a warning at a minimum of 30 days prior to setting this fee to property owners, so that they would be aware of it before it being charged. We also have a couple of additional fees, fireworks permits fees. Currently, these ones are not being charged a fee for an application for a fireworks permit, which is approved by our fire chief. But we are now recommending that there be a $50 charge for this fee. And then finally, we also are recommending that we have a statement in our fees and charges bylaw that any bylaw offense notices that are written under our bylaw enforcement bylaw offense notice ticket bylaw, that they be provided back to the applicant for any of those collection agency fees that are borne by the district. For Schedule E building permit fees, there's a number of changes happening with regards to the Schedule E. Although staff has not done a thorough review of our actual building permit fee calculation amount in comparison to other South Okanagan communities, that would be a larger review. But we recognize that there are a number of fees that have been omitted from our Schedule E or are in need of change. The big change I would say is probably the minimum application fee going from $50 to $150 to be in line with our comparables in the South Okanagan. As well, we are also recommending that we do a change there for requiring the minimum application fee to be charged upfront upon application instead of upon issuance, which is similarly done in Penticton and also the regional district. And then we have a number of other fees such as a revised plan review, a plumbing permit only fee, and a 1-year extension fee for building permits that have expired. For a blasting permit, we are just recommending an increase here from $30 to $50 as this schedule has not been changed since 1998. And we just think that we're still a bit out of comparison with other jurisdictions. And then finally, Schedule U has been added to the fees and charges bylaw, or is proposing to be added for mobile beach vending, which is a $700 permit fee to be added, where mobile vendors were going to be set up within our local parks. And we have Director of Community Services, Lori Mullen, on the line, who this proposal is coming from her office, and I won't get into the details of that, but Lori is here to take any questions with regards to this proposed fee. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Questions? Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My first comment will be that this hasn't gone in front of our Development Services Committee yet. And I would hate to see us do first, second, third reading without having input from that committee in which we struck so that they could talk about stuff in regards to this. I do have a couple questions, if I may, is in regards to your development services fees. Under ALR, it talks of a soil removal of $1,500 and soil placement for soil removal or soil. At a $1,500 fee, does that just reflect back on ALR lands, or does that reflect on any property that needs to wants to do soil removal or additions? The only reason I ask is that high fee will certainly drive any of that below ground, which is really going to make our bylaw officer even busier running around looking at soil deposit and placement. So do you have anything in regards to that one?
Sure. So to respond actually to your first comment there, if I may, Councillor Patton, staff felt that, and I did consider about bringing this forward to the Development Process Improvement Committee, but I felt that that these changes were more administrative in nature. Again, we're not doing a large review of our business license bylaw fee or our building permit fee in comparison to our comparables, but rather these are more administrative changes to the bylaw. So that was the rationale. But council can choose to send it to that committee if it so chooses. With regards to the second question there, this schedule would be only applicable to soil deposits and uses, and also placement of fill within ALR lands, if that clarifies.
Okay, thank you. If I may, Madam Mayor. Building permit fees, I realize going, how you've done it, going to $150 administration fee. My question being is, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have this on our Development Improvement Committee, is that we all are well aware that building costs have probably increased 50 to 60%, maybe even higher than that. So since our evaluation on our building permits fees is based on construction cost, we're already seeing an increase of revenues being generated within the municipality just by the increased construction costs that are being levied on our contractors. So I guess my question is it prudent to attach an additional $100 fee when already we're going to be reaping the benefits of a red-hot market with the cost of construction materials being at an all-time high that we've never experienced before?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Patton, I think that's a good question. I can't speak to the rationale in terms of philosophy of a $100 increase and whether that's a large impact in terms of overall building permit fee and for motivating or not motivating applicants. I do think that the process change of adding the fee as a requirement up front is an important one for us administratively. I think part of our discussions at the Development Process Improvement Committee have been the problem of incomplete applications that we are receiving. That small amount of fee can encourage the applicant to ensure that they're done their due diligence and having all of their application requirements ready and to be submitted prior to that payment being made upon application. And it's a way to incentivize that applicant to do their due diligence prior to providing us an application that's half completed on our desk that we are requiring further information on. So I would say a mechanism for us to encourage more complete applications being brought into our department.
Thank you. And I truly agree with what you're saying with perhaps maybe a better avenue to look at is going on cost recovery through the building department and development services rather than general revenues going through the district resources. That way you would have a bit better control in regards if it's cost recovery that would fall more in line with doing additional fee changes that maybe would be a little more palatable, even though it's only $100. But I'd like to reiterate that I do believe that this should go through the committee. Even though it is a small amount and it's a few changes, I do think that we struck that committee for this purpose, and that I would really like to consider tabling this until the committee meets on June 23rd. And so we could then discuss it at that meeting and then bring it forward. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
I'll just note that when you look at the chart, even with the increases, Summerland's still lower fees than both City of Penticton and the regional district on pretty much everything. And so I don't see this being too much of a burden on someone if they're going to be building in Summerland. It's going to cost them the same to apply here or less than it is to apply in Penticton or the regional district, unless I've made a mistake in understanding what this chart is saying.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carlson. I think it's not the point of whether Penticton is more, whether Peachland is more, whether the City of Kelowna is more. What it is we've struck a committee to discuss with our builders and our developers within Summerland in regards to how we move forward with development. And cost charges and the fees in which we do that are an intricate part of when they're doing business here. And I don't think that in saying, well, it's administrative, so we're not involving you, I don't think that we want to pick and choose on what we do with the committee. If we struck the committee, then we should involve the committee. If we feel that the committee is no longer needed, then you dissolve the committee. But I don't think we can cherry pick in which on the avenues in which we use them. Thank you.
I have a question related to this back and forthing. And does our terms of reference for that committee speak to addressing fees and charges?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think, I don't know about our specific reference to that, but certainly within the broad mandate of that committee, it would be captured within the type of advice we'd be looking for from that committee. And I would just say to that, we certainly think there's wisdom, and we've talked about it. We teetered back and forth, but I think what Councillor Patton is saying makes some sense to us. And also, we do always want to be super careful when we're making adjustments to fees to make sure that we don't negatively impact our building community.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything to add? Okay. Other questions? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding the beach vending, and if we have any comparisons with other communities for that permit fee, and how many beach vendors did we have in 2019? Thanks.
Laurie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Councillor Holmes. We did some research. I reached out throughout the valley as far as vending fees in our neighboring communities. Penticton is $1,300 to $1,550 per season, depending on the size of their vending location. Oliver is $500 a month. Canada Soyuz is $1,000 for the season, which is a longer season than ours. And Peachland is $400 a month. So the fee that we are proposing for this year is $700, and that's the same fee that we offered in 2019. The reason we're bringing it forward today is to have a standard fee consistent. In the past, we've kept it open and negotiated with vendors and then came back to council with each contract to get approval. So we wanted to avoid that coming back and forth to council and just have a flat rate. And the $700 seemed that it was on the low side, but there's not a lot of demand for food trucks for this year, probably because of COVID. And we just wanted to get a fee in place so that if there was food vendors that were interested, that we would have a fee that we could charge. And in 2019, we had 2 vendors that had licenses, and the year prior to that, we had in 2018, we had 3. Last year, we didn't offer the program because of COVID.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Patton, and then I have a couple.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to ask if I could do a motion, but perhaps you would like to do your questions first.
I would, thank you. When a temporary use permit comes forward, and I should know this, I just can't remember, is there the opportunity for public comment?
Yes, actually, the process for a temporary use permit is fairly similar to a rezoning application. The only difference is rather than providing a bylaw adoption, you're authorizing a permit to be issued. So it only requires 1 council resolution. But in terms of our procedural bylaw for the processing of both, they're identical. So it includes a public information meeting, includes notification to adjacent landowners, prior to even it coming forward to council, and as well as posting it in the Summerland Review as an example for 2 weeks prior to that information meeting occurring. So yes.
Okay, and the information meeting, that's different from a public hearing. Is there a public hearing like there would be for rezoning?
Yeah, so that would be the only difference, is because
Okay.
it's not a bylaw adoption, you're just issuing the permit. So
Okay,
the only opportunity for, I guess, public comment would be through the circulation process and that information meeting.
right.
Yeah.
Same thing for a renewal of a TUP?
It'd be the same process, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I have another question. If a resident is requesting a service through your department and has outstanding fines or fees through Bylaw or some other spot, do those need to be paid first before you will process another application?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's hard for us to track. It definitely comes to tax time. If we've got, like, for example, a nuisance abatement fees
Yes.
added to the tax bill from the year prior,
Yes.
those would have to be paid prior to them paying taxes. But I don't think we would have the legislative ability to turn away an application if they meet all of the application requirements, regardless of there being another enforcement action on that property.
Okay, thank you. And then a question related to Councillor Patton's thoughts about the building permits, the cost of that. Does the cost of our building permit, does it cover actual, administrative costs, or I guess it gets along back to the cost recovery thing?
Maybe I'll jump in
Okay.
on that, Madam Mayor, because I
Thank
was
you.
going to say, I would caution against a true cost recovery model. We'd still highly subsidize even with the $150. And if we were to try and limit it to the development services, which I think is the context of what Councillor Patton was referencing, the caution there is a lot of these involve referrals to, the electrical department, the public works department, and things. So a lot of times it comes down to what level seems fair, reasonable, and a reasonable cost recovery amount in light of, how we're perceived to the business community and in the cost of doing business in Summerland, which I think is towards some of the other comments Councillor Patton made. I also want to say I did have a chance now to check the terms of reference itself, Madam Mayor, further to your question. And it does indicate make recommendations on district policies, procedures, and bylaws that affect development, such as application fees, development charges, et cetera. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, I would like to put a motion forward that we table this until after the Development Process Improvement Committee has a opportunity to review and comment.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion? So that's June 23rd, our next meeting.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay, which is next week. All in favor? Okay, so that will be deferred until then, until after that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we are at 7.7, 2021 UBCM Community Excellence Awards, and Tammy's all ready to go there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, as indicated in your package, staff are preparing a award application to the 2021 UBCM Community Excellence Awards, and specifically in the asset management category for the district's new business case and project prioritization framework. As part of the application package, it's required that council endorse the application, and so staff are coming forward today asking for your consent to do that, to include that in the application package. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, council? Could I have someone bring forward a motion, please?
That an application to the 2021 UBCM Community Excellence Award be supported for the district's business case and project prioritization framework.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Seconder, Councillor Holmes. Discussion? All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you, Tammy. That was short and sweet. Thank you. I think this is a great project to put forward for recognition. Now on to 8.1. You can tell I'm hurrying here. Repealing Summerland Heritage Advisory Committee Bylaw 2021-026. And Dallas, oh, Karen, you're doing it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Both 8.1 and 8.2 are bylaws for adoption. The first one being the Heritage Advisory Committee bylaw being rescinded or repealed, and the second being the fees and charges amendment for recreation. Both were considered by council, given first 3 readings, and can now be adopted.
Okay, so let's deal with 8.1 first. Adoption. Councillor Van Elfen, seconded by Councillor Carlson. Were you itching to read it out? No, I'm fine. Okay, good. I didn't think so. Any further discussion on this for adoption? All in favor? And none opposed. And the same for 8.2, fees and charges. No, sorry. Yes, fees and charges amendment for the recreation and community services fees. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Patton, all in favor? Great, done with that. Greg and Karen, anyone wanting to speak at our second public comment? No. All right. So, resolution, please, to move this into a closed meeting. Councillor Patton, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Great, thank you.